Welcome back to the Discipling Marketplace Leaders, a small and medium-sized entrepreneurial training. And we are happy that you are with us today. I want to remind you that our goal in this ministry, and this ministry that is taking place through your church, is we want to unleash ourselves from the church building and remember that we are the church every day of the week. That God has given us unique opportunities through our business to be change agents, to be ambassadors on His behalf every day from Monday through Saturday. And then on Sunday, we come back to the church building with our brothers and sisters to be recharged and renewed and invigorated again, to be the church again for the rest of the week. And we believe when that happens, we can be transformative for the community. And ultimately, when Christians do that around the world, we can change the world. We are on session 3 now, and so we will be looking today at biblical worldview and business ethics. And so 2 different sections. I will have a good amount of activity in there, so I'm hoping that you'll be ready to pause the video and to have some discussion in your small group. We want to start with some devotions, and today we want to look at what does the Bible say about worldview. And so Romans 8 is a good text for us to look at in that, verses 5 through 14. And it says, "Those who are dominated by the sinful nature think about sinful things, but those who are controlled by the Holy Spirit think about things that please the Spirit. So letting your sinful nature control your mind leads to death, but letting the Spirit control your mind leads to life and peace. For the sinful nature is always hostile to God. It never did obey God's laws, and it never will. That's why those who are still under the control of their sinful nature can never please God. But you are not controlled by your sinful nature. You are controlled by the Spirit if you have the Spirit of God living in you. And remember that those who do not have the Spirit of Christ living in them do not belong to Him at all. And Christ lives within you, so even though your body will die because of sin, the Spirit gives you life because you have been made right with God. The Spirit of God, who raised Jesus from the dead, lives in you. And just as God raised Christ Jesus from the dead, He will give life to your mortal bodies by the same Spirit living within you. Therefore, dear brothers and sisters, you have no obligation to do what your sinful nature urges you to do. For if you live by its dictates, you will die. But if through the power of the Holy Spirit you put to death the deeds of your sinful nature, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God." And this is a great text because it talks specifically about how we are to live as children of God and how it is that we make decisions about how we live and the activities that we do, given that we have given ourselves over to God. And so our worldview and our ethics reflect whether or not we are living according to what the flesh desires or what the Spirit desires, whether we are hostile to God's law or whether we are submitting to it. And so our goal today in this particular session is to really start digging deep into that. What is the worldview that we live according to it? Is it our culture? Is it a family worldview? Is it a national worldview? Or is it God's worldview? And where are those differences and where do they line up? Because in many cases, our worldview, which is based on our culture or our nation or our family, lines up with the biblical worldview. But there are also a number of cases where it does not. So I'd like for you to pause right now and to take some time to have a discussion about this text and what your thoughts are about the text, and then open in prayer together, and then we will get into our session. All right, I hope you had a good discussion. And what we are looking at now is the foundation. We are continuing on in session 3, looking at the worldview, which is where we make some decisions about how to do our business. Do we do our business according to a biblical worldview or according to a cultural worldview? As well as ethics. We will all have ethical challenges. What we do with those challenges is where we begin to lay a foundation that says we will deal with those challenges according to our biblical worldview. And those are some decisions that we need to make often before we are threatened with challenges so that we can stand solidly on this firm foundation. And so there's 2 main questions that we want to answer. What is a worldview? And why is worldview important? Worldview is a total set of beliefs or assumptions that comprise the mindset of an individual and determine how they view reality. Within a people group, it is the dominant ideas that are held by the majority of people from the culture. A person's worldview will affect their attitude and their perception of life, family, work, the past, the present, and the future, and so on. And so worldview is a total set of beliefs or assumptions that make up our mindset. In a lot of ways, our worldview is the way in which we see the world. And that has come to us by how we were raised, by the context in which we were raised. And it's often the dominant ideas that we find within our people group, within our traditions, that we sometimes don't even think about. We don't even question why it is that we have some of the views that we have. And so it's an opportunity for us to explore some of those today. And they're usually big issues. They relate to the past, the present, and the future. Why is worldview important? It's important since it's at the heart of a culture and a people. One of the main places where we live out the drama of our worldview is in our daily work. And if you remember, we talked about how we spend the majority of our time as adults in the workplace. And so, of course, our worldview is going to impact our work as well and the way we do our business. At a day-to-day level, our worldview will shape our individual interactions as well as our individual decisions. So we want to ask the question, what is your worldview? What are the similarities or the differences that you may have with the cultural worldview around you? And this will mostly take place through an activity that we do. But we want to, before we go to that activity, we want to acknowledge that there's a cultural worldview, which is what we grew up in, and sometimes we do without even thinking. And then there's a biblical worldview. And to think about that, again, from the context of the Bible, we want to think about worldview in two different ways as it relates to the Bible. The first is that it's a framework. Okay, you can see a picture of a picture frame there on the side. A biblical worldview is the framework through which people can apply truth defined by biblical scripture to their view of the world. And so we want to look at the world through the frame of the Bible. What does God say? And as we look at different scenarios, we want to look at it knowing that there's nothing new under the sun, and that the Bible speaks to every context and application that we have in our world today. We can find a relevant scripture as well that can tie into that. And so we want to view the Bible as a framework that will help guide our worldview. Another analogy, another comparison is to say that it's like a compass. A biblical worldview is the compass that guides people in how they act and apply their views and understanding of the world within their everyday life. And so it's a compass that says we are heading towards true north. We are on our way to heaven. And in order to stay on the right path, there are things that we need to be able to understand that this is true north. This is what God says. And when we start veering off of that, we are often going the way of the culture or our own flesh. And we want to be able to continue to have the Bible to be our worldview and the compass that guides us in everyday life. And so in your book, you will see an activity. And the activity is going to have a number of different words in it. I'm just going to turn to that and hold that up to you. It's going to look something like this. In your workbook, and everybody will have a different page depending on the translation and the way it was copied. But you will see a number of different words that are listed on the left-hand side, and then you will see a space that says cultural beliefs. And so I want you to pause the tape, the video, and I want you to write down what are the cultural beliefs as it relates to freedom, or as it relates to community, or the poor and the vulnerable, and so on. Then what I would like you to do, and only after you've done all the cultural beliefs, is that I would like you to look up the biblical passages that are listed there. Maybe you can think of your own that are different. And spend some time going through those Bible passages and thinking about what does the Bible say about the same topic. So what does our culture believe about freedom, and what does the Bible say about freedom? And write down those different worldviews. At the end of the time, I want you to look through to see where does your cultural worldview line up with your biblical worldview, and maybe circle the ones that are different, because those are the ones that we as Christians need to be intentional about living out differently. One of the challenges in this is that it's kind of fun to get into the cultural beliefs. And these are not your specific beliefs, but what the dominant culture. And why do we believe certain things that we do? For example, in the US, when people sneeze, it's custom. In fact, it's considered polite to say bless you. I grew up saying bless you whenever anybody sneezed. Some people said God bless you. And I never really realized why it was that we did that until I found out that many, many centuries ago, the belief was when you sneezed, the force of the sneeze allowed for there to be a vacancy inside that the devil could quickly fill. And so you had to say God bless you very quickly in order to prevent the devil to fill that vacant space. Now, that's a superstition. And yet we've continued it without even thinking or knowing what we're doing. And so it's fun to think about that. But one of the challenges in this activity is to say, how does this relate to your business? What does it mean that you may view time as something that is important for relationships as opposed to fulfilling commitments? What does that mean for your business, and what is the impact on your business when the culture has a worldview that is different than the Bible? And so make sure that you consider that in your discussion. So I'd like you to take a few minutes right now, a number of minutes, and have a good discussion about this. And sometimes this can go on for quite a while. So give yourself enough time and have a fruitful and good discussion about what does the culture believe, how does that impact business, and then how does that compare to the Bible? And then we'll come back when you are done. All right, I hope you had a good discussion and we're able to look at the cultural worldview and the biblical worldview for each of these. There's obviously no right or wrong, so we can't really discuss these, but I do know that it's a very valuable conversation that can be had, especially as it relates to wealth and money, success and failure. Oftentimes, just as an example, what I have heard in many different places is when we believe that there is spirits at work, and we know and we acknowledge that God is at work, but also Satan is also at work. When we emphasize the spiritual realm more so than our own ability through Christ, greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world, we can sometimes behave like victims, like we are not responsible for success or failure. It is all from God. It is all from the spirits. It's either a product of curse or blessing. And certainly we know that God does do miracles, but he tends to make it the exception more so than the rule. And his rule tends to be that he has given the earth for us as his image bearers to carry out the work that he has given for us to do. And that can have an impact on how we do business sometimes, and how much we feel like we are in control versus being a victim to circumstances. So I hope you had some good discussions about that. And the same with health and sickness can be applied to that as well. And have an opportunity now to see maybe some ways that you need to rethink how you are doing things based on a biblical worldview versus the cultural worldview. I also hope that you learn to appreciate your cultural worldview and the richness that's in there and the strength that's in some of those beliefs. As we look at our worldview, I want us to take an opportunity to look through a chart that evaluates what our worldview is even from a Christian perspective. We have different worldviews that impact what we believe and what we think, and some of them are healthy and some of them are not. For example, there are some groups that value poverty, living simply. There are some good things in that. There are some entire groups that believe that getting involved in technology and having things is there's a consumption to it, and there's a earthy worldliness to it, and so they tend to stay away with that. There are other groups that value wealth, and we would talk about prosperity gospel. Those that believe that wealth is a sign of God's blessing, and therefore it's something that's good that we pursue to show God's blessing. But what we want to promote at DML is the last one, which is stewardship. We don't value poverty. We don't value wealth. What we value is stewardship and living what we believe is the biblical worldview for how we are to live. And so this is a chart that we want to look at, and you'll see at the top 3 different columns: poverty, wealth, and stewardship. And on the left, you will see the different categories that we will look at: possessions, work, what godly people are, what ungodly people are, why we give, and how we spend. So let's start with the first one. People who value poverty believe that possessions are evil, that possessions are a sign of consumption, that possessions are a sign of worldliness. People that value wealth believe that possessions are my right. I have a right to it. I earn the money. God has blessed me with these things. I have a right to possessions. But people who value stewardship see possessions as a responsibility. It's not something that has an evilness or a blessedness to it because it's a thing. But what it is it's a responsibility for how we use it, the money that we spend on it, and how we steward those possessions. People who value poverty view work as something that is necessary to meet basic needs. People who value wealth view work as a means to become rich. But those who value stewardship believe that work is an opportunity to serve Christ. We're not doing it just to get a little enough so that we can do something more spiritual, right? We believe that all of work is spiritual in stewardship. We aren't working just to become rich. We are working to serve Christ because God has created us to work as an act of worship, and that is why we do our work. People who value poverty say godly people are poor because they are close to the heart of Christ. People who value wealth say godly people are wealthy. God has blessed them. Whereas for stewardship and in DML, we believe that godly people has nothing to do with what they have in their bank account. Godly people are faithful people. You can have a lot, you can have a little. It has to do with your heart and how you are committed to listening to God and living out what God is calling you to do. If you value poverty, ungodly people are wealthy people. They are consumptive, they are selfish, they are corrupt probably. We believe in poverty, we would see ungodly people as wealthy people. If we value wealth, we would see ungodly people as poor people. They must not be living right or God would be blessing them. There must be some sin in their life that is keeping them from enjoying the blessings of God. Whereas if you value stewardship, ungodly people have nothing again to do with what is in their bank account. Ungodly people are unfaithful people. They are people who have chosen to live according to their own desires, to their own comfort, and not listening to God, not living a life where we pick up our cross and follow Him. If we value poverty, we give because we must. Right? We don't like money. We don't like having to do anything with money. And so we don't give out of any cheerful heart. We give because we must. If we value wealth, we give in order to get. We quote Malachi 3, which says, "Test me in this, and I will throw open the floodgates for you." So we give as a means of exchange. We give in order to get. But if we value stewardship, we give because we've been given so much by God. We give because we love God. We give because we appreciate everything that He has done for us. And so we give as a means of a grateful heart. We are trying to be a cheerful giver, not a manipulative giver. If we value poverty, our spending is fearful and joyless because we don't like money and we don't like things. If we value wealth, our spending is carefree and consumptive. Maybe I give my tithe, the rest is for me. I don't need to answer to anybody. I've given God what is His, the rest is mine. And that often gets us into some dangerous territories because we are still responsible to be stewards in all that God has given us. And so if we value stewardship, our spending is prayerful and responsible. We don't buy the most expensive things. We don't buy every time we get a chance. We try to increase our giving from beyond a tenth to more. Because we believe that we are stewards of what God has given us. And so, time for an assignment and to pause again, reflecting on your own worldview. What is true and what is false about it according to the Bible? So I want you to pause and to go through these 3 questions. Second, what have you learned from this activity? Have any parts of your worldview stood out as different from the biblical worldview? And if so, what are they? And what can you do about those? And third, identify an area in which you can grow closer to the biblical worldview. Where do you fall in terms of valuing poverty or wealth or stewardship? Where does your church fall? And have some time discussing that together and maybe doing some journaling, doing some writing about what your thoughts are on that. So when you are finished with that, come back and we will move on. Okay, I hope you had a good activity and had some good discussion together or good thoughts on your worldview. I want to move now into ethics, which is the application of our worldview. As we confront ethical challenges in our day-to-day life, that's where we get to apply. Are we living according to a biblical worldview or according to a cultural worldview? We're going to start the session off with a video. And this is a video of a man who faces an ethical dilemma. And then we will come back and discuss this. So enjoy this short clip.
Martinez, have a seat.
Thank you, sir.
You've been very productive your first month here. You do good work.
I'm very grateful to be here.
Well, Mr. Martinez, the reason I called you in here is that I'm looking for an additional manager to oversee inventory and shipping. Carries more responsibility, but it pays more. Sound like something you might be interested in?
Yes, I would.
But before I make my final decision, I'd like for you to work a shift in that department next week. You'll see a list of 17 crates coming in on this sheet. Now, one of those crates will be going to a separate warehouse. Mr. Martinez, when you report the inventory, I'd like for you to report that we received 16 crates.
17 are coming in. But you want me to write down 16?
Yes, that's right. I have another purpose for the extra crate. You are on my team, right? Because I really can't use people who aren't on my team. Tell you what, you think about it tonight and give me your answer in the morning. Make it 10 o'clock. But I'll need to know if you really want this job.
Good evening, sir.
Javi, we need this job. For the first time in a year, we're able to pay the bills.
I know, Carmen, but he made it very clear. If I was not the team player, he did not want me there.
Maybe it's not wrong. It just looks that way. He's the owner of the factory.
He asked me to write down false information, Carmen. He asked me to lie.
I don't want us to go back.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Martinez. How are you this morning?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I don't know yet. Please, have a seat. I trust you've had time to think about our conversation yesterday.
Yes, sir, I did.
And what did you decide? Are you on my team?
Mr. Tyson, I am very grateful to have a job here. But I cannot do as you have asked.
And why is that?
Because it is wrong, sir. And it would be dishonoring to my God and my family to lie on that report.
Do you understand what this may do to your job here?
Yes, sir, I do.
Javier, may I shake your hand? Young man, you just gave me the right answer. I've been looking for someone to manage inventory and shipping, and quite frankly, you were the last person on my list. But I need somebody I can trust. Will you take the job? We'll adjust your pay.
I would be honored to, sir.
Good. Then the job is yours. Now, Walter will go over all the specifics with you, and I'll make the announcement to the staff on Monday. Congratulations, Javier. Oh, and Javier, thanks for your integrity. It's rare.
Well done, Javier. After 6 times, I was getting discouraged.
All right, that ends that video. But you can see the challenge that he had. his family, his wife, was asking him to go ahead and do it. Maybe it's not wrong, it just looks that way. And yet he said, it would be dishonoring to my God and to my family to lie. And so he made a decision about his worldview, that he was going to live according to a biblical worldview, and not a cultural worldview that might say, well, you can bend things a little bit here or there. But it's not an easy thing, and that's the problem with ethics, is that ethics are not obviously black and white in terms of how to make decisions sometimes. And so just as Javier had to struggle with things, I'm sure you have as well. And so we're going to read through some different scenarios, and I would like for you to pause at the end of each one and have a discussion. Again, this session today has got a lot of interaction, a lot of dialogue together that we hope that you will have. And so there's 3 different scenarios that I want to read through, and I'll read through all 3, and you can pause at the end of each one and have your discussion about what should be done. What is the ethically right decision to make? The first one says this: a man and his wife are running a small shop supplying various goods that are needed on a daily basis. They are one of the only shops there that has the goods regularly. They have 4 children, all of whom are in school. A 50-kilogram bag of sugar is delivered. Upon dividing it into 1-kilogram bags, it is found that only 47 bags of 1 kilogram have been made. The owner has been shorted by the supplier by 3 kilograms, which is his total profit for that bag. In fact, he won't even cover his costs. Does he take the loss, knowing the impact it will have on the business, his ability to pay employees and keep the business running for the flourishing of the community? Or does he, this once, short each bag a little bit to make up the 50 bags and hope that the customers will not notice? Okay, so you get the picture. He has a 50 kilogram bag, and normally he would make 51 kg bags of sugar. This time he only got 47. So what does he do? Does he have each bag take a little bit of a loss in order to still have the 50 bags, or does he take the loss and only make 47 bags? So I'd like for you to pause and discuss that. The next scenario: you are an administrator of a school that is doing very well for the 300 plus students that you have there. You get some funds from the government to do some additional construction. For this particular tender or contract, they were late in making the payment. Upon receiving the money, you only had 2 weeks to spend before having to report back to the government and give back whatever was unused. You have other needs for the school, legitimate needs, but no time. Do you return the money knowing that it will likely not make its way back to the Ministry of Education? Or do you forge receipts and change the numbers in order to keep it to help the school? These are based on true stories. So again, the principal of the school felt that there was an intentional delay in the dissemination of the funds by the county government, so that there wouldn't be enough time to use it and the funds would have to be returned. And he really did have a construction project that he had been approved to do, but not enough time to do it. And so he had a real dilemma, and he came to the business group to say, what do I do? Do I give that money back knowing that it's not going to end up back where it's supposed to be for other good uses, but it's going to end up in somebody's pocket? Or do I continue on, forge the receipts, and continue on with my construction project? So pause again and discuss. The third discussion: a taxi driver tells a well-dressed customer a price that is higher than his normal price. When challenged on his price, the taxi driver says very innocently, "But you are able to pay that amount." The taxi driver knows that his regular charges are not covering depreciation, and that the actual cost is something that most customers are not able to pay. Is the driver right or wrong on having different prices? What would you say to this driver? Again, I would like for you to pause and have a discussion about changing prices and what a good business person should do in that, and then come back. Okay, I hope you had some good discussions. I'm not here to tell you the right or the wrong answer. That's something that God speaks to your heart on, as well as the people that you are in a group with. But one thing we need to acknowledge is that having ethics is a challenge. It's not easy to do, but it's even more of a challenge when we keep these things in secret and we keep them in the dark. We need to bring these things into the light, have discussions with other brothers and sisters who can give us wisdom to help inform us in doing the right thing. But let's go through some definitions now. What are ethics? Ethics are the moral principles that govern a person or group's behavior and their sense of right and wrong. So there are moral principles. Okay, when we say moral, we're not talking really even about spiritual. This is applying to all people, whether they are faith-based, whether they are Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whether they are atheists. These are just the general right and wrong that human beings have some moral code of ethics that we agree that this is right and this is wrong. But the principles are a little different based on the culture, based on the people group, based on the faith. So ethics are the moral principles that govern our behavior and our sense of right or wrong. And remember, earlier in the session, we said that we were going to live according to a biblical worldview. So the principles that we take are from the Bible and not from the culture. Another possible definition that people can use is knowing the difference, that ethics are knowing the difference between what you have the right to do in business and what is the right thing to do. What do you have the right to do versus what is the right thing to do? For example, I have the right as a taxi driver to charge $1,000 for a 1-mile trip. I have that right. There's no law that says I may not do that. But is it the right thing to do? If there's a shortage, for example, with COVID-19, when there's a shortage of food, I have the right to raise my prices, but is it the right thing to do? And there actually may be some laws against that. But there are some things that we try to go as close as we can to getting away with something that's not right, and yet not violating the law. So ethics would be knowing what the difference is between righteousness and justice. Challenge of business ethics includes the following. First, the constant juggling of profit versus ethics. That's the main challenge that we have in business ethics, is we want a profit and we are doing business to make a profit. For many of us, that's the main reason why we do business, and yet we have said that the main reason to do business from God's perspective is to help people flourish. And so that changes that juggling from looking at profit versus is this going to help people flourish or not. Another challenge is that codes of ethics do not produce ethical behavior. You can have a great list of rules and ethical behaviors on your wall. You can put the 10 Commandments up there. Doesn't mean that people are going to follow them. We're going to have to revisit it. We're going to have to unpack it. We're going to have to think through it and talk about scenarios. It's going to take some active and diligent work. Another challenge is that our ethics tend to flow from our core values. And so what have we stated as our core values? And sometimes we don't even state it, but our work shows what our core values are. If our core value is profit, our ethics will tend to flow from that. If our core value is a flourishing customer, our ethics will flow from that. If our employees are a cost of labor, our ethics will flow from that. If our employees are people that we help to have them flourish so that they can fulfill their calling, our ethics will flow from that. The next one, the core values we possess are not necessarily those by which we live. And so again, we can have a beautiful list of values and beautiful value statements, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are living by that. Our values come out in our actions, and our behaviors often will indicate what our values are. And another challenge we need to recognize is that conflicts of interest tend to lead to ethical problems. And so we need to understand where those conflicts of interest are. For example, hiring a family member, there's a conflict of interest in that. What happens when the family member does something? Are they treated differently than somebody who's not a family member? getting a contract from somebody in government through a friend presents a conflict of interest. Paying a bribe, of course, sets a conflict of interest, and so on. These tend to lead to ethical problems, and so sometimes we have to make those decisions ahead of time, what we will do with these conflicts of interest. The purpose of us looking at business ethics and making decisions about our business ethics are many. The first is it helps us define appropriate behavior. It helps us to think through at the outset, this is going to be okay. This is part of our foundation. This is going to help break the foundation. We aren't going to do that. So we need to define what appropriate behavior is, and that's going to look different in each business. It helps to establish organizational values. What are the things that we truly value in this business, and how do we live that out? Purpose of looking at business ethics is to help nurture individual responsibility. We can dictate from the top what our ethics are going to be, but that gets played out in the behavior of every person at every level, from the custodian and the security guard to the casual labor to the management and so on. And we each take responsibility, but the leadership guides it and then helps to hold people accountable for that. It provides leadership and oversight. As I just said, that leadership does need to come, but then it takes place at an individual level. Accountability then has to come from that. We can put it on the wall, we can talk about it, but then we need to hold people accountable and make sure that we understand we're not just talking about this, but we're doing it. It's also helpful for auditing and improvement. When you have an audit done, they will look at the things that you are doing and the things that you are not doing. Even as much as taking a vacation can be something that helps there to be ethical, to show or to out unethical behavior. And audits cannot sometimes point out that you're not doing this, and that's a potential barrier for you, as well as improving your business. Who are the primary stakeholders who help to shape our business ethics? There's quite a number. Our employees shape business ethics. How they end up behaving has an impact on the business and whether it is an ethical business or not. Our customers can shape our business ethics. I remember I was in Nigeria once, and we had just gassed up the car, and the driver asked for a receipt, and the employee just ripped off some blank receipts and threw them in the car. And I think there was 2 blank receipts. And so there's an ethical challenge right there that the employee is putting the customer in, because the customer could write down any expense. Obviously, you're asking for a receipt to submit that for reimbursement. You could make it much higher. You could submit 2. And so the employee is not doing something that's good for the business. And the customer sometimes asks the employee to change the amount on the receipt to a higher amount, and then they might split the difference of what was actually what the actual cost was. Suppliers can shape business ethics. As we read earlier, a person got 47 kg of sugar instead of 50. That ends up having an impact. Their ethics has an impact on the business ethics. The community can ask for favors. The community can have a sense of it's okay to pay bribes for a contract. Everybody does that, and so that's just part of what you do as well. The government, in demanding the bribe sometimes, or in taxes or in other things, can shape business ethics. And then shareholders as well. Often shareholders want a higher sense of profit. It makes profit the main value, and that has an impact on the business. So there's a number of different shareholders. Lastly, mass media, associations that you might be a part of, competitors, how you market, and so on, has an impact on the ethics. And so we have to remember that you can have an ethical decision for yourself and for your personal behavior, but there's a lot of influence that's coming in from different ways, and that's why this needs to continue to be revisited. Here are some true or false statements that you can discuss, and I'd like you to pause after I get through reading them and discuss whether you think they are true or false. So evaluate the following statements about business ethics. First, it's easy to be ethical. Is that true or false? Second, unethical behavior is part of business. Is that true or false? Number 3, there are no rewards for being ethical. Is that true or false? Number 4, ethical behavior will prevent me from being successful. Is that true or false? And last, business is like a sport. Push the rules and try not to get caught. Is that true or false? So I'd like for you to pause right now and have a discussion, and then we will come back. Okay, I hope you had a good discussion. The first one is it's easy to be ethical. And I hope you said that that's false. It's not easy. Regardless of your faith, of the strength of your faith, it can be a real challenge sometimes to make a right decision and to make a decision that will end up sacrificing profit, sacrificing sales, and the ability to grow your business. And so just as we saw with those earlier examples, to return that money to the government for that school principal, that will be a difficult thing to do. Number 2, unethical behavior is part of business. Again, I hope you said false to that. A lot of people do think that that's true, that you can't do business and be ethical, and that is not what we know from Genesis. God created us to do business, and He created it as a good thing, and so sin, unethical behavior, is not a part of that. Number 3, there are no rewards for being ethical. Again, I hope you said false to that. There are definitely rewards. We may not actually have earthly rewards. Some ethical decisions may close down a business, and that's not easy, and it certainly doesn't feel like there's a reward. But the rewards are sleeping at night and knowing that you are working to help people flourish and trusting that God is able to bring about good when things are difficult, and so on. Number 4, ethical behavior will prevent me from being successful. Again, false. It will not prevent you from being successful. It may have a different terminology of success. It may not be wealth. It may not be poverty, but it may be just enough to help you stay on the right course with God as well. And number 5, business is like a sport. Push the rules and try not to get caught. Again, all 5 of these are false. And so we don't try to get as close as we can to breaking the rules, but we try to live with a biblical worldview of what would God have us do in this situation. From your beliefs, you make a commitment to behave a certain way. And one of the things that we know is that our beliefs will impact our behavior. But one of the things we often forget is that our behavior also influences our beliefs. And the reality is that our brain doesn't like there to be conflict between what we believe and what we do. And so you may make a decision to have excellence as one of your values, that you will do everything with excellence. And then you do some things because of time, you got a little sloppy, you have a little bit of a lower quality, and you say, well, that's just the way it is. I just don't have time to do it with excellence. And over time, you will begin to change your standard of excellence. So your behavior influences your belief as much as your belief influences your behavior. And we need to be mindful from that. There needs to be a synergy of the two. We do what we believe, and we believe what we do, because our brain needs to resolve any sort of conflict. And so it's a mini covenant between your brain and your body, and as a Christian, what you do with God. As much as character is the cause of our actions, it is also the product of our actions. So our actions help to define our character, but our character should also help to define our actions. Too often we think it's a one-way street. Our belief determines our behavior, our character determines our actions, but we forget about the fact that the opposite is also true, and we need to be mindful of that. Our conscience plays a role in ethics. The word conscience, when we break it apart, actually means with knowledge, with science. And it's working on 2 different levels, on our intellect and our emotions. So our conscience, as we make decisions, ethical decisions relating to challenges, we are working on an intellectual level as well as an emotional level. And those 2 together give us the conscience that we need in terms of how we make decisions. It's an inner compass to keep us on the path of integrity. I will either feel comfortable and excused or guilty and accused. Our conscience can be a guide, but can also be an accomplice. We need to help shape our conscience. It can either guide us by helping us feel guilty and accused so that we try to redirect, or sometimes our conscience becomes seared and it doesn't produce the guilt that should be produced. We feel comfortable, we feel excused when actually we really are not in a position to do that, but we have changed our values and our beliefs to a point where that is able to take place. Our conscience plays a role in ethics. Conscience is impacted by culture, by society, and by education. There are universal moral laws, state or national regulations or laws, religious rules, cultural norms, the effect of an action, violation of human rights, the breaking of a contract or agreement. All of these things can help to affect and impact our conscience. As we deal with these different things, it's going to have an impact. But there are some things that are also looked upon, depending on where we are in society, by culture, education, or the society as a whole, that plays a role in ethics as well. There are some societies and even faith denominations that say alcohol is absolutely a no-no, and others that say it's okay as long as it's responsible. Smoking, polygamy, government, church government and structure. We have arguments over who is the right to give communion or to baptize. Practice of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, the use and form of sacraments. The worship style that we have also is an impact in our conscience. The best Bible version or translation. Opinions about the health and wealth gospel. And so we can see that ethics is not always black and white. We can't look at one denomination often, and some decisions we have, we may disagree with them, but we can live with them. And so it's big deals, but it's also small deals, and there's lots of gray. And that becomes a challenge, and we need to know for ourselves where we stand on some of these things. If we have integrity and good actions come out of that, then we feel secure. There's nothing to hide. If we take a crooked path and we do something that doesn't have integrity, the conscience is going to produce unrest, fear, and shame. If we have integrity, we tend to have a peace of mind. If we do something that lacks integrity, we tend to be afraid that someone will discover the truth. If we have integrity and we will have a clear conscience. If we take a path that does not have integrity, it can impact sleep, our relationships, and even our ability to do our work. Conscience is an important link between faith and action. Okay, so that brings us back to our worldview again. Conscience is to the mind what pain is to the body. Okay, pain alerts our body that there's something wrong and we need to pay attention to it. Pain is a good thing. Without pain, we would have a lot of problems. In fact, that's the problem with leprosy, is that the nerve endings die, and so we hurt ourselves, but we don't know, and we keep using it. Conscience is the same thing to the mind. It's a pain to the mind, and it's supposed to make us sit up and pay attention to what's happening and make some decisions. If we do not educate our conscience well, then it will become like leprosy. Our nerve endings will begin to die. So the next line says, our conscience is not an infallible guide, but it needs to be educated. It's a warning system that we have, but it is also able to be educated in a poor way. We need to educate it in the right way and not let our conscience be worn down. It's a warning system that is subservient to the rules and laws that God has given us in His Word. And so we go back to that biblical worldview, and we want to live according to that. And here's an interesting thought. Conscience is never stagnant. It's always in development. And that's something that we need to keep thinking about. We are constantly needing to be thinking about what are we informing our conscience, and how can we continue to grow it to be according to the biblical worldview, so that both our beliefs and our behavior end up coming out of that. There are some challenges that we end up having as we live in a world that has a seared conscience, or we live in a world that lives according to a worldly cultural worldview. And those we can summarize in 5 different key points. The first is the disruption in organizational relationships. When we lack ethics or we lack values or a biblical worldview, we seek power, we seek control, we gossip about other people, we are willing to step on other people in order to lift ourselves up higher. And this takes place across businesses. We struggle with the second one, how much to pay people. Do we pay people the minimum wage as the government has said, but it's often not followed through with. So we know we can get away with not paying people a minimum wage. But a minimum wage is not even as much as a livable wage. And a livable wage is what people actually need in order to flourish and to help their family flourish without having to work multiple jobs. So how do we make decisions about how much to pay people? That's an ethical dilemma and a challenge. One thing we know is that there are growing disparities of income. A philosopher, Plato, who lived a long time ago, said that the highest paid person in a business should make no more than 4 times the amount of the lowest paid person in a business. Okay, the highest paid person, so the owner, let's say, should not make more than 4 times the amount the lowest paid person. But unfortunately, today we find that the highest paid person makes 420 times the amount of the lowest paid person. 420 times. And what that means is that we as owners tend to think, I earned it, it's my business, I have the right to, and we're taking much more for ourselves, and we're not considering those who are making very little. And those are some ethical challenges. How do we make decisions about how to pay people? The third area is unsafe working conditions. It costs money to keep people safe, to provide them with the materials necessary to keep them free from injury, to protect their lungs if they're breathing in chemicals, and so on. There are some countries that have very high standards of keeping safe working conditions, and some that have very low. One of the reasons why we get so many goods from China at cheap prices is because their standards of working conditions are very low, and their wages are very low. And so we get to take advantage of lower prices at the cost of the ability for some people to provide for their family and to live and work in safe conditions. As employers, we have to make decisions about how safe we can keep our employees and still be able to keep the business open. The fourth is a payment of bribes, and of course we know it takes 2 to be involved in a bribe, the person making the demand and the person making the payment. These are big challenges that we have, and in many places where we are working, we can't just say stop paying bribes because the business will shut down. And so we have this guilt and this heaviness that we carry in, and on Sunday mornings we enter the church service and we want to not participate in a corrupt system, and yet we know that we have. And so how do we deal with that? Again, we have opportunities to talk to each other, to bring these things into the light. It's amazing how many creative ways I have heard people of getting around paying different bribes and still be able to hold on to integrity and keep the business open. Last, the pricing. In a negotiating culture, you set your first price and your last price, and you work within that. And so oftentimes if profit is our main goal, then any way we get to that is going to be okay. And what we want to say is you can have fluctuations in your price, like the taxi driver, but before you deal with that, you need to have your first price, what it is that people, the highest that people can go, and what is your last price, meaning you're not going to go below that, or you're going to actually be eating into your capital. Once you've set your first price and your last price, you can always start with your first price and allow people to negotiate. But you don't go above that based on the way somebody is dressed or hardships in a community. We know that we live according to an ethical mirror and reality. People judge themselves based on their intentions. Others are based on their behavior. Everyone is accountable for their actions. And so that's very, very true. We know what we intended. We know that our heart was in this place, whereas when we look at other people, we don't know what was in their heart, and so we looked only on their behavior. The story I like to give with this is I was driving with a pastor in a place where he was learning to drive, and I was helping him to learn how to drive. And it was a stick shift, and it was starting to rain, and we were coming up to a hill. And if you're familiar with driving a manual car with a stick shift, you know that coming up to a hill is tricky, and it's especially tricky when it's raining, and you're about to merge onto it's a T-junction. You're about to need to turn into traffic. And this whole day, this pastor had been so frustrated with people and saying, "Look at the way people are driving. Look at how this guy's driving. He doesn't respect other people. He doesn't, it doesn't make room for others." And then we came up to this T-junction with the hill and the rain, and he decided he wasn't going to stop, that he was just going to go right into his turn, and make other people have to stop. And as he was doing that, he said, "They just need to understand that I'm a new driver." And so what he was doing there was exactly what this says. People judge themselves based on their intentions. I'm just a new driver. I'm a little nervous. I'm a little scared. I don't really know. Whereas all day he had been judging people based on their behavior, not, of course, knowing what was going on with them. And so that's something that we need to think about as we make ethical decisions. And so part of the discussion is, what does it mean to be an ethical business person? What does it mean for you practically? Where are the ethical challenges that you have? Then consider these questions as well. How do ethics relate to salaries and benefits, both for your employees and for yourself? How do you make those decisions about how much to take for yourself, given that you put your capital into the business and the sweat of your brow has made this business? And how do you make those decisions for the employees? How much more are you making compared to how much your employees are making? How do ethics relate to manufacturing regarding the durability of a product? Do you have ethical challenges as it relates to your products or your services? How do ethics relate to pricing in your business? And what other areas of business are affected by ethics? So I'd like for you to take some time and to discuss these questions with each other in small groups, and then begin to make some recommendations for yourself on what you need to do and what your business is going to do as it relates to ethics. You need to maybe ask yourself a few questions in order to be able to make those steps to determining whether some actions are ethical. The first question is the action legal? Does the action violate the mission of the business? Who is affected, and by how by the action that you are taking? And how does this action appear through the lens of a biblical worldview? And so as you are coming up to making these decisions, you want to run through these questions in your mind. Lastly, we have the statement, if you have ethics, nothing else matters. If you don't have ethics, nothing else matters. We'd like for you to discuss this as well. Is this true? Is it possible that if you have ethics, nothing else matters? That is going to tie into everything: pricing, customer service, bookkeeping, marketing, and so on. If you don't have ethics, same is true. Nothing else matters. Anything is a go. So discuss that, and we hope that this was a good session for you, that you'll make some good decisions about worldview and ethics that will have a positive impact on your business. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time. I would like to end the session by reading this story, which has to do with ethics as well, which is just a fun little story about somebody who had an ethical challenge in the decisions that they made. And this is called The Seed. A successful businessman was growing old and knew it was time to choose a successor to take over the business. Instead of choosing one of his directors or his children, he decided to do something completely different. He called all the young executives in his company together. He said, "It is time for me to step down and choose the next CEO. I have decided to choose one of you." The young executives were shocked, but the boss continued, "I'm going to give each one of you a seed today, one very special seed. I want you to plant the seed, water it, and come back here 1 year from today with what you have grown from the seed I have given you. I will then judge the plants that you bring, and the one I choose will be the next CEO." One man named Jim was there that day, and he, like the others, received a seed. He went home and excitedly told his wife the story. She helped him get a pot, soil, and compost, and he planted the seed. Every day he would water it and watch it to see if it had grown. After about 3 weeks, some of the other executives were talking about their seeds and the plants that were beginning to grow. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks went by, still nothing. Jim kept checking his seed, but nothing ever grew. By now, others were talking about their plants, but Jim didn't have a plant, and he felt like a failure. 6 months went by, still nothing in Jim's pot. He just knew he had killed his seed. Everyone else had trees and tall plants, but he had nothing. Jim didn't say anything to his colleagues. However, he just kept watering and fertilizing the soil. He so wanted the seed to grow. A year finally went by, and all the young executives of the company brought their plants to the CEO for inspection. Jim told his wife that he wasn't going to take an empty pot, but she asked him to be honest about what happened. Jim felt sick to his stomach. It was going to be the most embarrassing moments of his life, but he knew his wife was right. Jim took his empty pot to the boardroom. When Jim arrived, he was amazed at the variety of plants grown by the other executives. They were beautiful in all shapes and sizes. Jim put his empty pot on the floor, and many of his colleagues laughed. A few felt sorry for him. When the CEO arrived, he surveyed the room and greeted his young executives. Jim just tried to hide in the back. "My, what great plants, trees, and flowers you have grown," said the CEO. "Today, one of you will be appointed the next CEO." All of a sudden, the CEO spotted Jim at the back of the room with his empty pot. He ordered the financial director to bring him to the front. Jim was terrified. He thought, "The CEO knows I'm a failure. Maybe he'll have me fired." When Jim got to the front, the CEO asked him what had happened to his seed. Jim told him the story. The CEO asked everyone to sit down except Jim. He looked at Jim and then announced to the young executives, "Behold, your next chief executive officer. His name is Jim." Jim couldn't believe it. Jim couldn't even grow his seed. How could he be the next CEO? The others said. Then the CEO said, "1 year ago today, I gave everyone in this room a seed. I told you to take the seed, plant it, water it, and bring it back to me today. But I gave you all boiled seeds. They were dead. It was not possible for them to grow. All of you, except Jim, have brought me trees and plants and flowers. When you found that the seed would not grow, you substituted another seed for the one I gave you. Jim was the only one with the courage, honesty, and integrity to bring me a pot with my seed in it. Therefore, he is the one who will be the new chief executive officer." If you plant honesty, you will reap trust. If you plant goodness, you will reap friends. If you plant humility, you will reap greatness. If you plant perseverance, you will reap contentment. If you plant consideration, you will reap perspective. If you plant hard work, you will reap success. If you plant forgiveness, you will reap reconciliation. So be careful what you plant now. It will determine what you reap later. Amen.